Hey everybody, what's going on? You're watching the Sit Down on DJ Sixsmith, Scott Barber, Adam Sweeney here with us. The Orange Years, the Nickelodeon story, brand new documentary coming out this week. Fellas, what's up? How are you?
Doing good. How are you, DJ?
I'm great. I got to relive my childhood by watching your documentary, so I'm pretty pumped. What was it like putting this whole thing together? Scott, why don't we start with you, man?
Amazing. It was so fun. I mean, we got to meet, like you said, you got to relive your childhood. We got to meet like basically everyone that we grew up watching. So it was a very humbling and amazing experience to meet all those people. And in addition to the stars, all the people that you grew up watching, to get to meet the people behind the camera that were responsible for shaping your childhood and finding out like where they got the ideas for the shows. That was also really cool in its own way.
Yeah, going off of that point, Adam, there's a lot of really profound moments early on for Nickelodeon. I mean, it didn't look like what it became. It was very much a channel that wasn't connecting with kids. And then a lot of women came in and really reshaped things. So what was it like learning about the most important people that got Nickelodeon to where it eventually went to?
It was fascinating and it was incredibly inspiring because, in 2020, moving into 2021, I think that female leadership and representation all around with respect to gender as well as racial diversity is super important. And so you're absolutely right. It's a lesson to be learned that it's so important to, one, not give up on your dreams, even if they're not working in the way that you originally anticipated, but additionally that representation matters. And so Geraldine Laybourne and Vanessa Coffey and Anne Sweeney and Anne Kramer and so many other wonderful women were responsible for shaping all of our childhoods, honestly. And so hopefully people will look at this and they'll look at Nickelodeon and Viacom also, and they'll say, hey, wait a second, maybe we do need to open the door. We do need to allow other voices to be heard because there's a lot of opportunity there.
It's so important. And the other most important thing here is just listen to kids and what they actually want to watch on TV. And Scott, that was really a key early on. So when you think about the history of Nickelodeon, what are a couple early shows where like they listened to kids and this worked out really well?
Yeah, I mean, one of the first shows I think where Nickelodeon found its identity was You Can't Do That on Television. And that was a Canadian show that Nickelodeon had licensed to play on their network. And they listened to the fact that kids latched onto that, unlike shows that they were doing before that. A lot of the shows that they were doing, they were trying to connect with kids and it just wasn't working, and I think that helped them find their identity, and it shaped the whole 80s and 90s, the whole next 2 decades. Another show that I think was really important was Clarissa Explains It All. There's a whole age group there where you're kind of going from being a little kid to a big kid. And that's really difficult for children to do. That's what a lot of kids are afraid of. They're afraid to go through that window where just when you find out who you are as a little kid, you get thrust into a whole new world where there's fashion and cliques and crushes. And I think that show, in addition to having a great representation with Melissa Joan Hart, it also was very important because it helped kids, I think, navigate that area that no other kids programming channel was really touching on.
I think one of the most fascinating things is that kids could see themselves with these different shows that were going on. And then also kids wanted to be on these shows. So Double Dare is a perfect example of that because you saw kids doing these crazy different situations and you wanted to jump into that. So Adam, how did Double Dare really help in shaping Nickelodeon's identity?
I think that it did on a number of levels. One, Mark Summers really kind of became America's uncle to a degree, right? So you had a parent figure that could speak to you on an even level, right? He didn't talk down. He always was very supportive. Additionally, it taught us that it's okay to be messy and to have fun. And also, additionally, that competition can be pleasant and that it's okay if you win or lose, to be honest, right? It's just a matter of how you play the game and how you also treat others. So I think that empathy and sympathy, even though it was a game show, Double Dare really showed us that matters, right? And so it wasn't of hostile. It was very supportive. And so you just had people that came from different walks of life. And we just all agreed that it's okay to be a kid and that knowledge matters. One thing that Scott and I have talked a lot about recently is that with the, kind of the continuing run of technology as it speeds up or accelerates, is that knowledge sometimes isn't considered to be a valuable asset. And Double Dare really rewarded children for that and for digging deep into kind of these vast areas of different knowledge. So I would love to see that come back. Double Dare has re-aired recently, but that really shaped the face of the brand in terms of the messiness, but also the culture and the diversity of children at large.
You make a great point there, Adam. And knowledge was something that was super important with Nick News. And you both have that scene with Magic Johnson there, which I totally forgot about. But that was a profound moment where a little girl who had struggled her whole life with what Magic Johnson was dealing with is able to talk to one of her heroes. So, Scott, what was it like reliving that moment? Because especially when Magic Johnson's news came out, that was such a big deal at the moment.
Yeah, that was a big moment going back and watching. Adam and I watched all of these old shows, and it was always great and really fun. But when we got the footage of Nick News and got to rewatch it in full, it was like very apparent how progressive and ahead of their time Nickelodeon was. I think that show sums it up. If you were to just look at that show, you can see how ahead of their time they were. The fact that they weren't afraid to talk to kids about HIV and safe sex. And this is a long time ago, So I think that part, Nick News a lot of times gets kind of the short end of the stick. People say, oh, Nick News, I didn't like that one. I always like this or that, the other, people always, when they're going back and reliving their shows. And I hope that our documentary kind of opens their eyes to how great Nick News actually was and how informative it was and how I think it shaped our generation in a lot of really positive ways.
Another show that I loved was All That. And obviously it gets compared to Saturday Night Live so often, but In Living Color probably is the better comp. So Adam, when you talk to the cast members, what was most fascinating going back and thinking about All That?
I think that's a great comparison. In Living Color, with Kenan Ivory Wayans and the Wayans brothers and Jim Carrey and so many other, Tommy Davidson, you could go down the list. I think that is a really, great comparison. The thing that fascinated me was the empowerment that the leaders, Brian Robbins, who is one of the creators, who would go on now to be heading up Nickelodeon, they entrusted the children to showcase their skills. And so when we got the chance to talk to them, what we found is that they were just as funny as the show writers, both behind the camera, the stuff that made the cut and the stuff that didn't make the cut. I mean, there's a reason that Kenan Thompson has become one of the most legendary SNL figures of all time. Is because they saw an eye for talent and then they also trusted them. And so I think that's kind of a lesson again for us to learn as adults is don't underestimate children, right? They are brilliant and they deserve to be respected and valued. And I think that's one of the reasons that we've gone back and that we admire Nickelodeon so much during the Orange years, but also to this day.
The other thing too is that if something is working on one show, go ahead and create it for another show. So Kenan and Kel were great cast members on All That. Go and create their own show there, and it was a smash. So Scott, when you think about Kenan and Kel, I mean, Kel Mitchell is one of the all-time great performers in my eyes. What was most interesting to you about that storyline?
Yeah, it was very interesting to me that, to think about how hard those guys were working back then, because they were still doing all that while they were also doing Kenan and Kel. So basically in their off time, they were doing one show or the other. To be kids and have that kind of work ethic, I think that shows why those two guys are both so incredibly successful and why that show, went on to, All That created the show, created the movie Good Burger. I think you can kind of see that Nickelodeon saw something in all of the cast of All That, but particularly those two guys pairing those up, how successful that was. And you can see how they continued that sort of pattern for years to come with shows like Drake and Josh.
Yeah, the other part of Nickelodeon, which is really interesting, is obviously the animation. And we had Rugrats and we had Doug. And Adam, I was really, struck by just the fact that people were using their own lives to inform their decisions. Like when Rugrats, like the guy's brother had just had a baby come home, and he was like, imagine how cool it would be if babies talked when adults left the room. Like, it's so simple, yet that's the type of stuff that doesn't happen enough in the industry. So when you think about Rugrats and Doug, what sticks out to you about why those shows were so successful?
I mean, DJ, I think you nailed it. Is that the idea is to write what you know and to speak honestly, and to um, show and discuss stories or create stories that have elements of truth. Doug, when you watch the documentary and you learn more about Jim Jenkins is Doug, right? Like, it's just that simple, from the way that he dresses to his very charming and very sweet demeanor to the way that he treats other people. And so I think that you're right. I think sometimes the industry, for better or worse, can tend to sometimes follow the leader. And there are moments where you don't have to overthink it, right? Nickelodeon was based really around the idea of what Geraldine Laybourne experienced whenever she saw her child. And she said, being a kid can be hard sometimes, but being a kid can be fun too. And so if you can dig deep into these universal truths and just show that, I think that people like that a lot more than they do seeing packaged and polished characters and figures that you can't relate to. There is some level to escapism, and there's value to reality TV and items like that. But the reality is, and Scott and I have talked about this to each other as childhood friends, is that we always grew up feeling like we could relate and be friends with everybody that was on Nickelodeon. We loved Disney, but I didn't really feel like I could relate or be close to somebody like a Britney Spears or Ryan Gosling or Justin Timberlake, as amazing as they are, right? Just because the reality is that they're rock stars and they're larger than life. And Nickelodeon was the channel, and it contained the family members that you felt like you could really, that you could go home to and that you could hang out with.
Yeah, a lot of great points right there. Scott, when you think about the TV industry now, it's obviously much, much different than it was with the Orange years. So when people look back, what are some of the big things you want them to take away when they watch your film?
I would love for people to see, one, how this authentic connection with kids was created. That it's not just nostalgia. People that are of a certain age, that were kids in the 80s and 90s, they love these shows. And to learn that it wasn't just random, it's not just nostalgia. There was a rhyme and reason and a lot of hard work and thought put into making these shows connect with kids and really get into people's hearts to this very day. That's something I hope people learn from the film. And also just that there's a beauty in letting creators be creative, that you don't have to create the same show over and over and over again. All of these shows, Are You Afraid of the Dark, all that, Doug, Rugrats, they were all very different. And I think that's kind of what made Nickelodeon so beautiful.
Yeah, well said. Well, guys, really nice to meet you. Can you give everybody the information when they can check out the film and all that?
Of course. So The Orange Years is available for pre-order right now. It is released on November 17th. You can go to iTunes. You can also get the physical copy at Amazon and Target.com. And you can also rent it at Amazon. So it's available on Tuesday, November 17th, and we hope that you enjoy it.
Beautiful. Scott, Adam, great film. Really nice to meet you guys, and we'll talk down the road, all right?
Awesome.
Thank
Thanks
you
a
so
lot, DJ.
much.